Good morning, Mark. How you doing?
Very well. Glad to be with you.
We're running just a smidge late today because we had a false start. I actually started up the stream and didn't have the settings right, so we had to catch up and do it. But we're definitely live now.
I'm so glad because I'm enjoying this more and more each week. It seems like we're getting our rhythm and enjoying the experience.
Well, today's a big day, and you may not know why it's a big day, but today we're experimenting with a few things. So this has been a thing on Facebook Live primarily. That's what we've been calling it. But we're actually now on YouTube at the same time. We're going live to YouTube, and really cool. We're actually testing out a system by which we go to another platform that I'm very curious about. That might be a potential way to deal with things when we go live in our worship services, and it might be more interactive because we like interactivity. I think the experience of going to church is seeing Ginger, yeah, next up TikTok. I think so. I think that there is a discussion about things like that afoot. So I think Mark has an illustrious career as a dancer, and he doesn't like to talk about that too much. But you know, TikTok is the place for dances, and we may see something like that coming up from Mark soon. What do you think?
I have no trouble talking about my dance background. I have my face that shows curmudgeonly disgust has to do with TikTok. It just saddens me to no end that TikTok has become the go-to media platform. And what does that say? That we've reduced, it's the primary, isn't that what we were saying? It's the primary, surpassing everything else as
Yeah,
the
the
primary.
rumor that I heard this week was that TikTok is now the most visited URL on the internet above Google. It replaced Google as
And,
the
and
most used.
what's the time limit on a TikTok that you can add?
Who are you talking to? Do you think I know these
You.
things?
Well, that's my point. Who know? I mean, we've reduced. It's like 15 seconds, and it's people dancing and cats, and that's the pinnacle of the achievement of the internet. I just saddens me at some core level. I'm sorry.
Get with the times, Mark. Get with the times. Get
Yeah,
with the
that's what my
times.
wife says. Yeah.
Ginger is saying you can go live and be unlimited. I think that's an interesting idea.
Well, let's do it next week. TikTok, we're there, baby. Speaking of where we are, metaphorically as well as physically, I'm in Oak Ridge. Steve, where are you and where are you broadcasting from?
Yeah, we thought this would be a good time to talk about this a little bit. I wear many hats, and one of the things that's been a development over the last couple of months has been that I'm doing a job for another church in a similar way that I'm doing the job for communications for First Church. Of course, First Church is my first and most valued client. We got to say that, right?
Right.
Set above all other priorities. But here's the deal. This church is here in Washington, D.C. It's really, really exciting place to be. And let me tell you why. It is called St. John's Episcopal Church on Lafayette Square. Does that ring a bell with you at all? Does that
I
is
was going to
that
say,
church?
I remember when I heard that, thinking, I heard that name. I know that name, but remind me why that is important.
Well, it is actually yes, actually I got to answer Ginger. Ginger, you're winning the prize for interactivity and you're setting the tone for everybody. This is what we love. So everybody follow Ginger's example and ask your questions, make your comments, be snarky. We're good for it. We can take it,
Hey,
right?
And let me just reassure you, Ginger, we get 100% of Steve. He's offering the other churches the leftovers because he puts out 120%.
Well, that's the thing. It's everybody gets 100% of me.
There you go. I love it. So
And
tell us, St. John's.
St. John's on Lafayette Square is a church that was in the news a couple of years ago because it's where a famous photograph of a president holding a Bible was taken, and it went around the world. Do you remember that?
I do indeed. Abraham Lincoln sat there and held his Bible. Wait, he did do that in that church, but this is a different president. It is the Honorable Donald Q. Trump that stood there.
Donald Q.
After,
Here's the deal. I think that's the way that the church is known right now. I mean, it's it's because of the notoriety that church brought. I was thrilled to work, to establish a relationship here because I was amazed, absolutely amazed at the way I saw this church project its presence in the midst of that moment. I was completely blown away. I think they did it exactly right. The bishop of the National Cathedral, Marion Buddy, was here on site and doing some press work, and just the way the church handled itself in the midst of that really, really intense moment was extremely impressive to me. But it's not. That's just one little incident in the life of this historic church. It built in the early 1800s. Abraham Lincoln used to sit in the back pew on Sunday evenings and just kind of slip in and slip out. And it's an absolutely historic place. And it's a new challenge for me because I'm having to learn a lot of Episcopalian language. We talk about rectors and not pastors or ministers. We talk about the vestry instead of the church council. So it's a bit of a learning curve, but that's why and it's given me a great reason to come down to the city again and be part of the community here in Washington D.C. instead of just being out of in the suburbs. So that's why you see the background mixed up a little bit, and it's pretty fun, pretty exciting. But it's definitely got me hopping right now, learning how to. I've also brought on a couple of new folks to my team. One, and they're both very good people who are familiar with the world that this kind of communications works in, but also they're one of them. They definitely they address deficiencies that I have. Let's just say I know that it's hard to believe that I have any, but sometimes I fall apart on the details, right? Just getting down there on and doing the detail work, punctuation in a shared document or something where a lot of hands have been working on something. Just things get by me, and the folks that I'm have now on my team who are at the service of they're helping supply some of that 100% that I give to First Church. Getting it done. It's pretty cool. Pretty exciting time for me. Yeah.
It is pretty cool, and I'm glad we can share you with others because you bring a great deal of skill to this position and communications. And frankly, I love the connection with St. John's through you because exactly what you just said, that they took that moment in their life when the president stood in front of them for a photo op, and they did what they could to make that have an impact in the positive sense in the world. And I feel like our congregation is in that very same moment of having an opportunity to deal with what is a very difficult subject. Those of you who have been seeing the Holston Home for Children articles in the Knoxville News Sentinel and the Oak Ridger know that we find ourselves, simply because we are Methodists and this children's home in Greenville shares that name, we find ourselves in a particular moment.
Yeah, and let's just kind of move on and talk about that. I think there are a lot of similarities to the situation First Church finds it. I don't know that any church just kind of is raring to go and to get into these kinds of conversations around justice and fairness and kindness and all those things together. We kind of like to lay low, right? And we like to sometimes just kind of keep the peace, but peace and justice sometimes are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I heard it said in Palestine one time that the oppressor wants peace and the oppressed wants justice. And so I've always found that to be a kind of a helpful lens through which to look at things. So tell me about what being here in DC and really trying to watch as little news as possible. Tell me what happened. Tell us what happened.
Well, it all began a few months ago when the Biden administration changed the rules for agencies like Holston Methodist Home for Children in Greenville about how they could receive federal funding. They were no longer given waivers for uh, some uh, some agencies like that, which is an adoption agency among other things, were given waivers saying if you have a religious background that precludes you from allowing people who have different religious views from you to adopt through your agency, then that's fine. And we understand that, and here's a waiver to the rule, which means you can't discriminate based on religion. The Biden administration pulled that waiver and said, from now on, you have to allow adoptions to go through for families that may not have the same religious background as you. You can't use that to cut them. Holston Home for Children announced that they were suing the Biden administration because they did not want to allow same-sex couples to adopt children. Same-sex couples that have passed every other aspect of do they have a safe home, a good home, no felony backgrounds, blah, 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 blah. Well, when that came to light, it angered quite a few people here in our congregation. I called the CEO and had a long conversation, and he basically said, in no uncertain terms, we're very aware that our funding comes from a majority of people who are on the conservative end of this conversation, and therefore we're not going to change it. That's a decision by the board of directors, and that's why we're suing the Biden administration so we can continue to have funding from those people who are on the conservative end who make donations to our home. And that upset me.
Yeah,
And
that's cool. I mean, that's I've always felt like it was a good Christian thing to let money direct moral decisions. But go on.
yes, and I made it clear how I was feeling, and he assured me he understood how I was feeling. And so I sat back and thought, okay, what do we do now? What's the next step? And life goes on. Christmas comes. Here we are in January, and then this blows up, which is the latest problem is a Jewish couple had applied to adopt through Holston Methodist Home for Children, and were denied because they were Jewish. And that came out in the newspapers here in the area, and the Jewish couple is now suing Holston Home for discrimination based on religious background. And it tossed our congregation, quite a few people in our congregation really tossed them around. They were upset. I got visits from people in the congregation. I got multiple emails from people in the congregation angry. How can our children's home do this? And it started this next wave of conversation, which is, first of all, one, Holston Methodist Home for Children is not affiliated with the Methodist Church. It used to be affiliated many, many years ago, but about more than 20 years ago, they cut that tie because they believed they could raise more money not being affiliated with the Methodist Church. So the Holston Annual Conference does not provide them money. Some local churches still send them money, and that's why if you go to the Holston Methodist Home for Children website, you have to really pull it apart to see that they're not affiliated. They claim that heritage because they still want to get money from local churches.
And let me just point out, it's not just the Holston Methodist Home. That's the way we talk. It is on the website as Holston United Methodist Home for Children. It's not just a generic Methodist like Methodist Medical Center, for instance. It's United Methodist Home for Children. But go on.
Yeah. But that's a perfect analogy of the Methodist Medical Center in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. used to have a clear-cut connection to the United Methodist Church. It does not anymore. It's an independent agency. There has to be some Methodists on their board of directors, but that's a pretty tenuous line. And to answer Judy's question, does the conference make it clear to us that they're not Methodist? It's only, frankly, it's only been in these last few months that this has come up when they're suing the Biden administration and this latest fiasco with the Jewish couple. Now our annual conference is issuing a statement saying, just so you know, they are not part of the United Methodist Church and we do not fund them. And we've gotten some pretty clear direction from our district superintendent and bishop saying, we're pursuing exactly what should happen next. They're not announcing what they're going to do, but I sure hope to God they're consulting lawyers about how to politely but firmly ask that Holston United Methodist Home for Children to remove that title from their name, to clarify all that. So we're just waiting and being told we should be patient. The conference is going to come out with more information and go from there.
And this is not just a kind of an academic argument where we're getting involved in somebody else's business that, our church has had a very, very long and very deep connection. We've been part of the family, so to speak, of Holston United Methodist Home for Children for decades.
We have. In fact, it's really interesting. The people, they ask local churches to have what are called ambassadors that connect with Holston Home for Children to kind of keep local churches up to date about needs, what's going on. We've had an ambassador that's been there for several years that when all this started to blow up, I contacted her and said, what do you think of this? And her response was, well, we've already talked in missions committee about they have, I think she said, don't quote me on this, but I think it's $40 million in reserve. She said, what we have given them in the past, it'd be better served giving it to someone who has great need. They don't have a great need for money. They have plenty of money. So she was willing to say, let's stop funding. And missions committee here voted to not fund them going forward. But she added to that, and given all that's going on now with this lawsuits, I completely support withdrawing all connection and support from that agency. The people in this congregation have been very angry about the Methodist name being used in what is basically an anti-Semitic action. And that's what I wanted to ask you, Steve. I think you have phrased it better than anyone I've heard. Why would saying to a Jewish couple, you are not allowed to adopt through our agency, why would that be termed anti-Semitic?
Okay, thank you for asking me, because I think there's a couple of things that I've had in my experience that might help break this down for folks. Because it's not just I'll say it's not a clear, in the society we live in today, it is not a clear-cut thing. So, and here's why. All of this comes down to a lot of discussion and debate over the last, 15 years or more around religious liberty. What is religious liberty? What is religious freedom? We believe in religious freedom in this country. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Religious freedom. We have the Establishment Clause in the I guess it's in the Bill of Rights, or no, it's in the Constitution itself, where the state can't establish a religion and can't really show preference. It's been interpreted by the Supreme Court that the church can't show, the state can't show preference towards one religion over another. The interpretation of that has become basically, like everything else has, a partisan issue. So there are some folks that believe that what that means is, religious freedom means you're free to practice your religion. You should have all the rights. If you're a Zoroastrian, a part of a very, very small, society of believers in this country, you should have the same rights to practice your faith as anybody else does. Okay, And therefore, freedom means we are all free to practice our faith. Then there's another side of the argument that says, well, practicing my religious liberty means that I shouldn't have to sell a wedding cake to a gay couple because my religious faith does not affirm that kind of marriage. It's also in the discussion a lot right now about vaccines and vaccine mandates. It was a big part of the conversation when the Affordable Care Act was passed. The Catholic Church did not want to have to pay into anything that provided contraception or potentially abortions for people, and therefore wanted to be exempt from participating in certain parts of the Affordable Care Act based upon their freedom of religion. In vaccine mandates, there's you and I both, Mark, if we wanted to make some money right now, we could put ourselves out as offering a religious exemption certificate. And maybe we should consider that. Maybe that's a good side hustle for us. But as ordained pastors, there are some people out there selling basically religious exemptions to their vaccine mandates, and all of that's being tested in the courts right now. So I would say that there's kind of a positive view of religious freedom. It means you're free to practice your religion and you have the same rights as anything else, or you have the freedom to practice your faith in a way that cuts you off from and limits your contact with people and things that you don't agree with or that you deem sinful. Now, I'm going to just kind of toss it out there. Which side of this argument do we see ourselves falling on? I think that's pretty obvious right now. So when that comes down to this situation, which I think is it's really egregious no matter how you look at it. But to me, the anti-Semitism piece is especially troubling. By the way, it happens to be Holocaust Remembrance Day. So let's just throw that out there. Anti-Semitism is, I have learned over the years, is a very, very insidious thing. It crops up in our language in ways that we don't even really recognize, such as, talking about the Old and the New Testaments. Well, the Old Testament, we acknowledge as, some people will call it the Hebrew Bible. Instead, to try to get rid of this demarcation. If you call it the Old Testament, then it's kind of saying, well, there's a New Testament that is superior to the Old one. And even Luther said, the New Testament, the Old Testament is really impossible to understand. It's impossible to understand God in this way. So you have to do it through the lens of the New Testament. The only way you can understand the Old Testament is to do it through the lens of the New Testament. Well, we'd call that supersessionism. We would call that a basic belief that Christianity is a superior religion. It is an enlightened form of Judaism. After all, Jesus was a Jew. He was a critic of the Judaism of his day, and Christianity grew out of that. That is by definition an anti-Semitic construct. It's a very common construct. It's a very popular construct, but it is an anti-Semitic idea. And
but I mean, you're talking about a pretty heady philosophical, theological concept there. I want to bring you back to why is when you say to a Jewish couple, you can't adopt children, bring it back to the practical. Why is that anti-Semitic?
I think it's based in the whole thing. I think it's basically a statement of saying we don't trust the way you're going to raise your children. We want you to raise them the right way, and that means Christianity. Now, I understand that Holston Home has come back and said, well, no, it's in our documents that we want our children to be the children we place in families, we want them to be raised in Christian homes. Okay, well, I guess it's possible in some universe to place kids in whatever home you want, you deem. They take federal money, which kind of changes the rules, always has. You can't take federal money and then kind of just do what you want, right? That's illegal, for one, or I think I'm not a lawyer, so,
Right.
and I don't even play one on TV. But that's problematic. But from a moral standpoint, it is problematic, I think, because we're saying as Christians, well, you Jewish parents, you're not good enough. Your religion is not good enough. And we don't even want to judge you based upon your ability to raise a child or your place to raise a child. We're going to dismiss you purely because of your Jewish faith. I assume they would say the same thing to a Muslim family or a Hindu family or anything else. But again, all of those are bad. We call it anti-Semitic because this is what classical anti-Semitism looks like. And again, I'm an ardent opponent of anti-Semitism in the church because we can no longer be supersessionists after the Holocaust. If there was ever a time we could hold on to those beliefs, we certainly can't do it now, knowing what it can come to.
Seeing how what seems like such a small step, this is one agency saying, we're not going to let Jewish people adopt. That's not just a small step. That is a huge statement about how we're going to treat Jewish people in our culture and why so many people in our congregation were so upset by this recent set of events.
And it has precedent, it establishes a precedent. So this is going to go to the courts, and the courts, when the courts make decisions, that sets a precedent. And if the current thinking on religious liberty, which seems to be popular these days and gaining ground, that it's an opportunity for you to hold on to your, let's just call it for what it is, bigoted ideas, then if that becomes coded into law more than it already is, that's a trend that I don't think any of us who care about people and understand, no matter what you believe, no matter what religion you adhere to, you are a child of God, period. And you are loved by God, period. End of story. Beginning of story. We can't abide by that. So I think that this is a really important place for. It seems to me to be relevant for the church to weigh in on this particular situation because it's clearly a theological matter.
It is, and it goes back to if we follow Jesus. You notice when Jesus interacted with people, the question Jesus asked was not, "What do you believe?" And if you line up with correct, righteous belief, then you'll have a part of my life and I'll connect with you. I'll heal you. That's not. It was, are you in need? Do you desire God to be connected to you? There wasn't that line that said, oh, are you a good Jew or a bad Jew? Are you faithful or not? That's not following Jesus' teaching and ministry and example.
Yeah, and just it's I learned in seminary there's a difference between a contract and a covenant, right? A contract is if you do this, then I will do that, and a covenant is you'll do this because I'm that, and it shows up in the most clear case in the covenant between God and God's people, which says I will be your God, and you will be my people. It doesn't say, and it doesn't limit that to any specific group of people, tribe of people. It says, the covenant is, I will be your God, and you will be my people. And it's not, I will be God, your God if you will be my people.
Right.
It's
And all that theological background is what led our church council this past Tuesday night, meeting in its normal session, to pass a resolution. That resolution, which was actually put forward by a church council member, one of our pastors on staff here helped her craft that and got the language down, but we passed it unanimously. Uh, and I'll let Steve read portions of that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
just
just
get
a
it on
little
paper.
background, Mark. How did that? Can you tell us how this came to pass? I mean, how was this? What was the momentum that brought this, this thing forward in the
Well, as I
church
was
through the
saying earlier,
process?
when all this came about in terms of the newspaper articles on this situation with the Jewish couple in Holston Home for Children, we had multiple church members showing up, calling me, emailing me, saying this cannot stand. We've got to do something. They're we're attached to this. People in this community think that's what Methodists believe, and so we should do something. And when this resolution came forward and was, like I said, crafted by a church council member and a staff member helped it refine the language, presented at council, and our council basically said, yes, not only should we pass this, but what are we going to do about it? Is there any action we can take? They were very interested in trying to find ways to communicate to this greater Oak Ridge community, the greater Knoxville area. This is not what we believe. And this is Holston Home for Children, Holston Methodist Home for Children, United Methodist Home for Children, is not associated with the Methodist Church. And if you are upset about this as we are upset, we need to make that perfectly clear that we disagree with how this is playing out and what their actions they've taken.
And so just to read portions of this, which by the way you can find on our website, FUMCOR.org. I believe it's posted in our Facebook feed as well. Yes, it is. I did do that yesterday. That was definitely on my list to do yesterday. Whereas Holston Home, United Methodist Home for Children in Greenville, Tennessee, has existed as a haven for children. I mean, again, this is supportive language. It's since 1895 by housing children experiencing homeless, supporting persons seeking to adopt children, both domestically and internationally, offering counseling through adventure activities, facilitating the training and certification for foster families, and providing group care for children. I mean, that's not condemnatory language in the least. Because we have a very long relationship with this venerable institution.
Yeah, and a heritage of helping children that matters, and we don't want to condemn. Oh, they're letting children be adopted. We fully support so many good ministries there.
And we want it to continue.
These last steps have just been unacceptable.
Yeah.
The board of directors needs to change how they're pursuing their ministry.
And I love this paragraph, couple of sentences, or I guess it's just one big long sentence, but that ties the whole idea back to baptism. Because you've been preaching the last few weeks on sacraments and what sacraments are in the church. And it's important to remember that, our two sacraments are baptism and Holy Communion. And baptism is, it's one of the vows in the baptismal ceremony that says, that's echoed in this paragraph, which says, whereas we accept the freedom and power God gives us to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves, as affirmed in the vows of our United Methodist baptismal covenant, and view discrimination against people based solely upon religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or same-sex marriage status as evil.
Love that. Saying it clearly. This is evil to discriminate based on those things.
Any of those things. And let's go. I mean, there are all kinds of, yeah, but you could, but what about this? What about that? And we can have those debates all day long. And I'm sure that those debates are happening all day long on social media, whether we
Yep.
want them to or not. But for the church to take that stand and to affirm that language is just powerful to me. Really, really powerful.
Makes me happy. I'm so pleased that our church council felt it was time to say something, to speak up.
So
And
very simply,
now the conversation.
the resolution continues just to say what actions are necessary and what the word of the church is in this situation. And I urge you to go back to the website. Anybody who's interested, go to the website and look this up and print it out. And please share it. Share it. Let people know this is something we feel like we have to weigh in on, but two, see these beautiful words that are theologically clear and based upon Christian ideas, and spread the word that First Church has said these things, because it needs to be known that United Methodists are not anti-Semites. We are not bigots. We are not anti-gay, although there are many who are, unfortunately.
Yeah. But that's also, it's time for the church to step up, and yes, we're all struggling with where's that line. We don't want to play politics. We don't want to get into partisanship, blah, blah, blah. But when there's an obvious evil, when someone is discriminated against by purely saying, you as Jewish people are not capable of raising children. Only, but not because we've talked to you, we've figured out your lifestyle somehow failure. None of that. It's just, oh, you're Jewish, then you can't raise children properly. That's just wrong. And I'm pleased that we're at least trying to say that.
It is absolutely unacceptable in light of historical consequences that the church has been a part of for 2,000 years. We know where this goes, and it's not an exaggeration. Again, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. The gas chambers were only about 75 years ago. And we have to remember that.
And Steve could, this is not the time to go into it, but Steve could have an entire hour talking about how it was the churches in Germany that did not step up at the right time to say this is unacceptable. And those, what we call small steps, aren't small at all. They lead down a path toward great devastation and destruction on entire groups of people. And the Holocaust is, for those who are just joining us, Holocaust Remembrance Day today. So there's certainly an overlap there.
And Jim puts it up on the, we're putting it up on here, that the link on the webpage doesn't work for me to read the rest from the initial opening post. I just want to say that, yes, in this time of great importance, the website software is failing us right now. And I struggled with it all day yesterday. I thank you for pointing it out, Jim. We've had several instances from people wanting to read this document to viewing the stream of the funeral last Saturday. But there's been an update to WordPress that's gone out that I'm pretty sure I'm going to blame for the problems. What I will say is that it is intermittent. So if it's not working now, it might be working 30 seconds from now. So just keep trying. Sorry about that.
For those of you joining us online, one of the questions that came up just in the last 24 hours is, now that this resolution is passed, should we give this and people in the community an opportunity with a petition to say, I agree with this resolution? And there's conversation right now in our staff, and it's about to fall over into the church leadership. Would that be a positive to say the church has made this statement, the church council's made this statement? If you agree with it, sign this petition. Only to give voice. I mean, that's the frustration so many of us have. It's hard to even watch the news anymore because you feel like I can't even express how outraged I am at something, or the anger, or the frustration, or the questions that we have. Would it be a positive thing if we put this out as a petition and ask, if you agree with this, would you sign on with it? I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Are petitions, and this is the conversation we're having, are petitions just, they don't really accomplish anything, so don't bother? Or is there some value in allowing people to say, I agree, and this gives me an outlet for my frustration in this matter?
So yeah, put it in the comments. Let us know what you think, and let's have that conversation today. I think that would be that's my sense is that we all in times like this, we don't want to feel helpless. We want to do something, and we all know that yes, social media things, petitions, and maybe they don't do so much. They don't accomplish much, but I can tell you from working on Capitol Hill, they do. People listen, and I think in this case, it could be at least a way to amplify the voice of the church a little bit. Yeah. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, I know the frustration of, I will sometimes click on petitions and sign something, and then I get inundated with, okay, well, if you like that petition, here's another, and here's another, and here's another. We're not talking about that. We're trying to just give voice. And thank you, Judy, for talking about where do you sign. I think I will say that our Holston annual conference leadership has tried to send out the word that if this is frustrating for you, if you have a response that you would like to share, be sure you can send it to the Holston annual conference of the Methodist Church, but there's no linkage. We're not the same as Holston United Methodist Home for Children. That's where you need to send your emails. That's where you need to send your letters. They need to hear from you. If you just send it to the Methodists, we're gonna look at it and go, okay, that's interesting, but we don't sit on the board of directors. Holston United Methodist Home for Children in Greenville, Tennessee, is where you need to send your thoughts, questions, commentary.
And I think that if you feel motivated, you should express your opinion to Holston Home. If First Church did a petition, it would be just another way to kind of add your voice. Yeah.
I think that's really the modern dilemma for Christians right now. Is nobody wants to give up separation of church and state, but at what point? What's the true voice that we need to have in our culture, in our community, in our legal system, that expresses that we think that some things are wrong and some things are good? And how do we express that? And some things are evil, like this situation. What's the path that we need to take to have integrity and still maintain our baptismal vows to confront evil in whatever form it presents itself?
And I'm reminded of Archbishop Tutu's comment that the church and the state should not be in collusion together, but the church is always the conscience of the state, and the church's role is to always be the conscience of the state. And I think that's really, this is a church-state issue, but this is also like this is a I think it's closer than that. I think this is our church speaking as a friend to an institution that we have a very, very long relationship with.
Yeah.
I think that's really what's going on here.
Well, I appreciate everybody joining us today for this conversation. If you have any questions, please throw them in there.
I think one thing you probably might want to know is that we're not doing a bait and switch on you. We really did intend for Lauri Jo Cranford to be part of this conversation and to talk about preaching with Lauri Jo. Lauri Jo couldn't make it with us today, and I can only assume that her roles as a district superintendent over the area which I believe governs Holston Home may have something to do with her absence today. So we're gonna check back with Lauri Jo and get her scheduled on hopefully a calmer day when she doesn't have so many things to deal with.
Yeah. And don't forget that we still want you to put into the chat other topics that you'd like us to cover. I am more than happy to talk about preaching every week. I would be thrilled. But you may get bored with that. I don't know. So let us know.
Never.
Never. Never.
Well, what's coming up in the life of the church this week, Mark? Anything spectacular? Anything going on this weekend, for instance?
Well, we wind down our sermon series on sacraments. We've talked about baptism, we've talked about communion, and this week we're talking about the sacramental view of all life. How does it change how we perceive life itself? And I know that sounds kind of esoteric, but it's really not. And the question that I think should drive our thoughts going into worship this weekend is, where do you experience the presence and the love of God? Where have you experienced that in the world? In your child's birth, at looking at the beauty of the snow that fell last week, on the mountaintop, on the golf course? Where do you experience the presence of God in a powerful way? Believe it or not, that is a really powerful and significant spirituality question.
Just asking the question and being mindful of that every day, I think, is a really powerful thing. Yeah.
And that question will be asked in the sermon, and hopefully it's asked through the Psalm 19. If you want to get a leg up, read the first few verses of Psalm 19 and reflect on that, because that's where we'll be focused this coming Sunday morning. Other than that, our youth just got back from Resurrection, had a great Resurrection experience. Our children's ministries are kind of continuing to grow a little bit as families have vaccinated children and can return. Everything's kind of moving along. Our new recovery ministry is taking steps forward to decide how they're going to implement recovery here at First Church. And if you know someone or you yourself struggle with recovery issues of alcohol and drug addiction, first of all, know you're not alone. That is very much a part of our congregation and every congregation. You are not alone. There's quite a few people who are struggling with the very same thing, and there are people here who want to help. And I know Matt Holder would be happy to help and talk to you about it.
Matt is absolutely amazing. I have really enjoyed getting to know him through staff meetings and just the odd conversation. I love his haircut, for one. I think it's a very stylish dude that he has. But Matt is he's completely invested in helping people recover from addiction. And one thing he's talked about in staff meeting lately is trying to get some training around the use of Narcan more and more available, and more Narcan available, because it's a drug that actually saves. If you overdose and you're with somebody who overdoses, you can give them something that immediately shocks them right back into life. It's a life-saving drug, and it's very interesting to hear Matt talk about that. And I love the fact that a church is going there. Any church, but especially what I consider to be my church.
That's right. I'm a chaplain at the Oak Ridge Fire Department, and I went to a captain's meeting. It's a meeting of all the captains and chiefs. And the very first topic that came up in conversation was about how two or three overdoses last night that took place in Oak Ridge. And the first question asked, did you need to use Narcan? And it made me just that click. In case you didn't know it, there is a huge crisis right now in East Tennessee with overdoses. Overdose deaths are up at a significant amount. So be aware. And if you know of a friend who's struggling, do not be quiet. Go and talk to them. Or if you are struggling, call and let us help you.
And there is a ministry, comprehensive addiction recovery ministry developing at First Church. Yep.
There is.
All right, Mark. Next week, I'm going to say with confidence, but we never know exactly how these things are going to unfold, which is what makes it so lovely and lively. But next week, our guest is a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, the Reverend Neil Christie. He, like me, is a very, very big deal.
I've heard that both about you and him. I look forward to meeting him and hopefully talking about exactly kind of continuing this conversation about justice issues and as well as maybe a little preaching if I'm lucky.
Yeah, Neil is great. He's a friend of mine from a long time back. He used to work for the General Board of Church and Society here in D.C. He now works for the Baltimore Washington Annual Conference. And I would say that he is this is like Methodist nerd level stuff, all the way up to the very highest level. He is probably the world's foremost expert in the social principles of the United Methodist Church.
A significant document that gets passed every 4 years that kind of gives a glimpse at the social conscience of our denomination.
And Neil, I think, is going to talk. Neil can talk about anything. Believe me, he is quite the talker. You won't have any trouble sustaining the conversation with Neil. But he's going to talk a little bit about. It's really kind of it's going to be helpful in maintaining the conversation we've just had. It's why do churches need to be involved in things like this? And Neil really helped me understand years ago the difference between mercy ministry and justice ministry, how the two are related and how the two are different. And we're good at mercy ministry in most of our churches, but we struggle with justice ministry. And he can talk about that better than anybody in the church. So I mean that, anybody in the church.
Great conversation.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope you can join us next week.
Same time, same channel. Tell all your friends.